Hello, everybody, and welcome and good afternoon to the Retained Recruiter Show. My name is James.
And I'm Jo. Nice to see you all here at a slightly later time, but for a very, very good reason, isn't it, James?
Indeed, we're joined by a very special guest, somebody who I met probably a year, 18 months ago, and had great pleasure in sharing a screen with him at that time. So, David Perry, welcome to the Retained Recruiter Show. We've been looking forward to seeing you for a few weeks now. And as we said off air, we hope you're going to be the entertainment for today.
I can't believe you actually invited me back. So let's go.
Hello, everybody, and welcome and good afternoon. Well, listen, one of my favourite nicknames for David is he's known as the Rogue Recruiter. Oh, and there's Jo. Jo's playing something else for us in the back.
We're in stereo.
Whoa,
so good. I want to be in it and watch it at the same time.
Okay. Let me start that again, just to show everybody this is live. So yeah, one of my favourite nicknames for David is the Rogue Recruiter, which he's been sort of coined with that phrase. So hopefully today we're going to hear about David. Jo, what's on the agenda for today? What things are we going to cover? I've got a couple of topics.
So yeah, we want to ask you a lot of questions, David, because you've got a lot of really great advice and information. And I think after a couple of years of COVID, and particularly over here, we've had Brexit, but there's been a lot of turmoil and sort of instability. And we know that you, a year ago, you said that you believe we were entering a golden era of recruitment. So we want to talk to you about that and your confidence that if that assessment is still true. But equally, I think we want to also talk about retained recruitment. And I think those two things do go together a little bit. The importance of retained recruitment, if you think it's important, the value that it adds at all sides. And then if we have got people who are listening, because we do get a lot of people listening into this who are maybe thinking of dipping their toe into retained or transitioning over into that higher value retained service, just your top tips, so the top tips that you would give to a business owner who's looking to make them move into it. But I think, James, we want to start with the golden era comment and whether you still think that that's correct or not.
Well, if you
David, just one thing before we get started, Dave, just one thing. When we talk about golden, we sometimes talk about 50, and that's 50 years. And there's a lot of experience that you contain, and we sort of want to pull that out. And I know you and I spoke, I say about a year ago, talking about the golden era of recruitment. So yeah, let's get your views on that. And so the floor is yours.
So, when I said we were entering the golden age of recruiting, it was about a year ago. And I assure you that anybody that was watching us a year ago probably thought, what's the term? I was daft. And yet, so we recorded that in May or June, and yet by September, here we are. We're in the midst of the largest candidate shortage the world has ever seen. It's not going to get any better for a whole variety of reasons in terms of, the shortage isn't going to get solved in any short term. In fact, I don't think it's going to get solved for 2 decades. 2 reasons. One, COVID has wreaked havoc around the world. In North America, we've lost 1 million people have died. Don't know how many of them had jobs, but if I had to guess, according to statistics, probably 90% of them. And those people aren't furloughed. And I'm not saying that to be smug, but those people are out of the market. I'm sure it's a similar number in the UK. On top of that, China has gone from 20 years ago when I wrote my first book. They had, I think, 5 companies in the global 500. Now they've got 168, second only to the US by a bit. And they didn't grow a pile of leaders all of a sudden to allow them to come from behind and do that. And it's not just China buying China. It is Chinese companies that have gone to North America and Britain and France and hired the best of the best and brought them in-house, brought them to China or set them up in factories that the Chinese own. So, the talent pool at the executive level is getting thinner and thinner. People are retiring, people have passed away, and people are getting recruited en masse by companies that didn't exist really 20 years ago. So how do you fill that executive void? You don't. So it's sort of, I don't know what your football leanings are, but I don't know who the top man is right now in Manchester, but there's only one, right? And,
well, yes, it's not Manchester United, but let's not get into that because I'm from Manchester, so I'll be hunted down, David.
Okay. So my point is, every football or every soccer club in the UK has one top person, and they don't have 2; they have 1, and they tend to build their clubs around that. And if that person leaves, they're kind of done for until they go out and hire somebody else. So talent is at an all-time high in terms of demand. and talent is at an all-time low in terms of quantity. So how do you make up for that? And eventually your clients are going to figure it out themselves, and you're not going to have to remind them. And it may take another couple of months. I've been through so many recessions I can't remember. Remember, I've been at this since 1985, 1988 on my own. I mean, I went out in 88, and about 3 weeks after I went out, the 88 recession happened. Woohoo! Good timing, Dave. But here I am. So, and the point in this is eventually prospective customers recognize that doing it the same way they've always done it, and in which case for most companies it's on contingency, doesn't work. And maybe they only hired one contingency agency, maybe they hired 3, maybe they hired 5. Going to 10 and 20 it doesn't get them anywhere any faster. So when you talk about retainer, we've always been a retainer shop ever since 1989. I do contingency work, but the first question I always ask clients are, what's the downside if you get this, if this role goes unfilled? If they can't answer it, we're probably not going to take the assignment, and it's probably not a retainer. But most of them at the executive or mid-management level can go, oh my God, and they'll tell you what it means to the company if this doesn't get hired, doesn't get filled. And then they'll turn around and tell you, because you ask them, so what does it mean to you? Well, it means if I get this filled, I can actually go to my children's recitals, I can go to the soccer games, and blah, blah, blah. And so at the end of this thing, when we're talking about deals and they ask you how much you charge, I always say, well, not nearly enough. And they laugh.
Very true.
What? That's kind of cheeky. What do you mean by that? And I said, well, if you don't get this filled, this is going to happen. You just said that, right? I said, and to you on the business side and on the personal side, this is what's going to happen to you. So I'm going to solve all those problems. So what I'm charging is not nearly enough. I'm thinking as what I normally charge. And I'll just sit there and pause for a couple of seconds. I said, but the good news is, you're a new customer and I have to charge you what I charge all my other new clients. And that's, 33%.
Yeah.
And what type of response did you get, David?
Well, it runs from, okay, to, oh, we've never worked on retainer before. And I'll say, clearly, and they'll say, don't be a smartass. And I'll say, I'm not. You've had this problem open for how long? You just told me it's been open for 6 months and it's costing you X, Y, Z. So either you're not serious about your business or it's really not that important. So if it's not that important and you're not that serious, we're probably not the search firm for you, because when we take on an assignment, we only take it on because we know we're going to complete it. I've got a great track record, and I'm not about to have somebody accidentally ruin it. So, which is it? Do you want it done, or do you want another 6 months? And they have to make a decision. And sometimes they say, a couple of words that, every now and then I hear, every now and then, not very often, and they hang up. But, I haven't heard that in probably 10 years. And people who initially say no, I'll give you a perfect example. A guy this time last year asked us to hire 3 salespeople because he needed to open a new division. This new division, these 3 salespeople were going to account for about $4.5 million in sales, $4.5 million in sales. Easy jobs, as a sales rep, door to door, telephony, wireless internet, not hard. And so we listened. I've known this guy for 7 or 8 years, and we gave him a proposal. Our proposal is 23 pages long. It tells you what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, what we're responsible for, what you're responsible for as a client, the whole 9 yards. And for them as a client, it's mostly showing up, doing the interview with us, and giving us feedback, right? And other than that, your responsibilities are pretty slim. So he did this, and at the end of this presentation, he said, great, we did the proposal, sent it in. We had an intake meeting. I normally don't do an intake meeting until we actually have a signed proposal. But he said, no, that's okay. It's just a formality. So we did it. I've known him for 8 years, right? And at the end of this, he said, well, we were looking at your proposal and we think that's a little rich. I said, rich for me or rich for you? I don't understand. And he says, well, we have a counter proposal. So they gave us the counter proposal. I said, oh my God, that is phenomenal. Not for us, for somebody else. That's a phenomenal opportunity. I mean, the ability to grow your business out to $4.5 and $5 million and collect, and I did the math pretty fast in my head, and collect about, according to your numbers, $90,000 in fees. He says, yeah. I says, no, that's not for us. Our proposal is what it is, and this is not for us. So thank you very much. So he hung up. So it was a month and a half ago He called back. It's almost a year. And he said, you were right. I was wrong. We'll never talk about this again. And I said, no, we probably will. He said, but I hired 5 guys. I said, I thought you only needed 3. He said, yeah, I know. I only needed 3. I ended up hiring 5. None of them are here. I said, how'd they do on hitting the targets? And he said, missed. I said, you can't miss $4.5 million. They had to hit some of it. He said, oh, maybe a couple $100,000.
Wow.
How's that working? Well, we're willing to pay your fee. I said, well, I tell you what happened. I really like you. When I went to the whole group and we had a vote, and it was 10-1 against. I was the 1 for. I wanted to take the assignment because I like you, but no, we voted 10-1 against taking the assignment. We're not going to do it. So he's still looking. It's been more than a year. He sunk $2 million into building new towers. He needed the $5 million to pay off the $2 million he'd sunk. So now he's out right now. Well, technically about $7 million. Are we going to do the assignments? No. Why? Because I'd rather have these conversations with clients and say, hey, so-and-so. Yeah, I know so-and-so. Well, here's what happened. And I will have these conversations. Yeah. Because I can.
I think they're great cautionary tales there, David, in terms of when clients try to penny pinch. And, we had another guest on recently, and they were telling us about how they'd actually had a very intelligent client who said they wanted to pay more than what he'd asked for, or more than what they usually pay, just because they want to get to the front of the queue. Yep. And I think what you're talking about there is actually a couple of things. I think there's some lessons that people who are listening, I hope they're taking some amazing takeaways from some of these, because I just love your response to how much is your fee? Not nearly enough. And it's sort of it's tongue in cheek, but you're deadly serious with it. Because it's about then explaining those stories. I think the value of you having that story to say the client who decided to penny pinch and then come back crawling on his hands and knees, and you still said no to it because that moment has passed. I think that's a very, very powerful lesson for people to look up. So let's come back to this golden era, Dave. So what you said is we've got a shortage of top talent and lots of opportunities. So how we get what are your thoughts on what people can do to work on this?
Well, it depends on which end of the business they're coming from, right? If I was in the contingency business and I wanted to go into the retained business, I would do what I did 25 years ago, and I'll never admit this to anybody publicly, by the way, so you have to bleep all of this out. Yep, exactly. What I did 25 years ago is I wanted to go into a specific industry. And I went out and found a guy, and I started making presentations. And I accidentally got him a job right away. So I tried to find somebody else, and I couldn't. So what I did instead is I made somebody up. Yeah, I made somebody up, and then I took a look at a list of 20 companies that I wanted to do business with, and I went and made a presentation to this candidate and told them, every single one of them, that this guy was in play. I was presenting him in other places, and they'd be wise to move on it quickly. And it didn't matter when they called back. Even if they booked it right away, the candidate ended up getting another job. What I did is I cycled through 15 companies that way and ended up with 7 that I liked that we kept as clients. And I said, the guy's gone. I said, finding someone like this again, I'd love to, but that's hard, really hard. I said, I can put, there's 2 ways we do business with customers or, prospects. I said, we can actually dedicate the resources on our end, and we'll go out and actually hunt them down, with your project at the front of the queue, and we'll spend the hours and spend the days finding this individual and bring them back to you. I said, or we can put you on a list with everybody else. And when we, come up with someone that we think you might be interested in, we'll give you a call. So, most of them said, well, what happened last time? I said, well, we didn't know you. You're on that list. I can keep you on that list. No, we want a guy. So, well, then this is what we do for a living. We're a search firm that goes out and, and at the time I had a very small diagram, show them how we did it. I brought one today if you're interested in seeing ours. And I stepped them through it, and I said, and to do that, we charge 33%. And at the time it was 33% back in the early 80s and 90s. I said it's a third, a third, and a third. A third when we start, a third in 30 days, and a third when we're finished. That seems reasonable. And away we went. That's how we did it. That's how. Now, you got to understand, when I started, I'm so old, and I go back so far in the business, there weren't a lot of books that talked about this. In fact, there were none. You know, the only training there were Tony Bruno's cassette tapes that we all listened to, or Steve Finkel's book, Breakthrough, which is, you know, an interesting book. So, you know, most of the stuff that I've learned and or adopted into the business, I had to get from, you know, others like Stephen Covey, you know, his whole concept of, you know, start with the end in mind. Well, that's what we do. I talked to a prospect 3 days ago on a COO. And I said, well, let's start with the end in mind. I said, you want a guy, you want him to stay. Yes. I said, so do you want a guy or do you want someone that's going to stay? Well, I want someone that's going to stay. Great. So that's good because that's what I want to hear. We have a 1-year warranty. And we have a 1-year warranty because we built this process. And I'll show you the process. And I took them through the process. I said, so we go through all this stuff. And at the end, what you end up with the candidate who's, you know, is part of your business. And they're ingrained in the business even before they start. You know, we call it the inside out approach. I said, and if that's what you want, that's what we do. Here's how we bill. And he said, that's great. Can you send me a couple page proposal? I said, no, I'll send you a proposal. It's 23 pages long. Thankfully, I got on the internet, pulled up most of the stuff I need to know about you beforehand. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions now. And if the answers are what I think they are, then we'll put a proposal together and I'll fire it off to you by next Tuesday. He said, great. This is Friday morning. By Friday night, he had it. It's 23 pages long. Will we get the proposal? I don't know. But if we don't, whoever gets the proposal instead of us, because we get undercut all the time, are going to have to live up to the standards that we've just set. And I know most of our clients, the first time we do business with a client, the first time we go in for an interview, I'll end up finding this book on their, that's it, there we go. This book on their back shelf or on their desktop, because they're actually following the search as we're taking them through it. It's hilarious. But, you know, I say to clients, and I've said this to other recruiters all the time, we wrote Executive Recruiting for Dummies, not to put recruiters out of business, but really to put HR people back where they belong, which is, you know, handling benefits and Christmas parties. And I don't mean that facetiously. I have a couple friends in HR, and they have advanced degrees in strategy and marketing and engineering. They're not your typical HR people. So we give everybody that book so they know that we know what we're doing and they can follow along. And, you know, and generally I say, if you've got an HR person, I'd love to have them as a silent partner in the search. I don't want them making comments in interviews, you know, unless they've cleared it with us ahead of time. Now, I've had this happen. I've had people walk into an interview, had the chairman of the board, CEO, president, and a board member in an interview when we brought a guy in Chicago. The company does about $950 million. And I brought a guy in for an interview as going to be an SVP. And the HR director came in 20 minutes late, sat around the round table, and, you know, we were talking about something. And he said, oh, I got a question, which he had not told me. He said, he turned to the guy and he said, I hear your company and you in particular were named in a lawsuit. What happened there? Well, my candidate, who's very, very professional, turned to him and said, well, did you finish reading the whole article and the one that's attached to it? Because if you had, then you'd know that it was the governor of X state who made these allegations. And he's currently in prison, by the way, because they were false. And you'd know that if you read to the bottom of that article. And then he looked at him and he said, do you have any other questions that are relevant? And the guy just sat there and shut his face for the rest of the day. He was fired 2 weeks later. The director of HR was fired 2 weeks later because this candidate we wanted to hire. And as he walked me to the elevator, he said, these people are wonderful. He said, but it gives me pause that anyone that's this smart could hire, and I quote, a moron like that to ask such a question in an interview. Yeah. And I said, and I apologized. And I said, well, he's just learning. This is the first time. He said, no, I'm out. That was a 6-month search to find this guy. We did find somebody else, but it was another 6 months. It's hard.
I think the point you make there about HR, I think it is actually, well, all the points you make are really, really valid. But I do think that there's a lot of barriers, I think, a lot of which to being able to do a full retained search. And I do think that a lot of those barriers are put in place by us first. You know, the biggest objection you have to overcome is your own. And as recruiters and business owners, you know, one of the biggest objections we get is, you know, well, it's really hard to do a retained search if you're dealing with HR. But I do think you said earlier on about the service you provide. It's a full service that you're providing to a business, which transcends just sending CVs. As you said before, it's not about just sending. It's not about sending people. It's about being able to send the right person who gets the job and goes on to stay. And I think there's a piece there that, as recruiters, and I know I was guilty of this in the early days, we don't think about that as recruiters. We think about sending people to the client. We're not thinking about the end in mind. We're not thinking about the retention of the right people to enable the growth of the business. So I think, do you think mindset plays a lot with recruiters trying to get into retained?
Yeah. So if you really want to change your, I'm sorry, I'm going to pull up 2 books of mine here, and I apologize in advance, but I just watched the last 8 episodes, so I was waiting to do this. I'm thinking, how can I shake the tree a little bit to make a point? Doing retained search is all about attitude, and the attitude starts with you have a problem as a client or a prospect. You have a problem that I can solve. I know I can solve this problem because I've been solving it for eons. My challenge is I have to differentiate myself from 500,000 other recruiters who probably talked to you beforehand. Mm-hmm. And the first thing I do is I'll tell someone, it's never an HR person I deal with. If it is an HR person, I will ask them when the last time was they did a SWOT analysis on this role. And they'll go, what? I said, okay, so I need to do a full SWOT analysis. If you're capable of doing it, that's great. If you're not, I need to talk to your boss. In fact, I probably need to talk to the CEO and the president anyway. And if you're not willing to allow me to do that, then this conversation's over because I can't help you. And I'll say, you can go on my website, or you can just go to Google and just Google the words recruitment SWOT analysis. And one of our pages will come up and it will step you through how a SWOT analysis is done. But you as an HR person, I'm sure have done SWOT analysis before and understand their significance. So I'm willing to have you in the room when I step through this so you can step through it yourself the next time. So when you say that, then most of them go, oh, I can learn something here. So most of it's attitudinal. And if you want to change your attitude, go buy that book. That book is called Hiring Greatness. That's the book I wrote following my 1,000th search. And I wrote the book because there's a little old man in the City of Industry in Los Angeles, it's a suburb, who called me a couple of weeks after that Rogue Recruiter article in the Wall Street Journal. And he said, is it the Rogue Recruiter? I said, yes, it is. Can I help you? And we had this conversation. He had hired the 2 largest search firms in the world to hire a COO for him for one of his facilities in Milwaukee. Yeah, Milwaukee. And they were failed. They both collected $125,000 in fees. That's what retained is about, and they failed. So he wanted to know the third time was the charm and whether or not we were any bloody good. Actually, that's a quote. And I said, yep, we are. And I took him through a SWOT analysis, asked him a bunch of questions, and he said, that's great, let's do it. And I said, well, I'm not sure. I said, I'm going to send you a proposal. I said, and if you get the proposal and you read it, you send me back 2 first-class tickets to Los Angeles. And a check for $35,000. And he said, okay. I said, okay. So I sent him the proposal, and like 5 days later, I get this check, and the tickets. So I'm going to Los Angeles. I grab my partner, we get on the plane, and we drive into Los Angeles. And I'm meeting, and this is all in the book. And I'm meeting this guy, and this little old man who's 84 years old, and he's brought in his CEO, or not CEO. He brought in his chairman and one of his board members, and they're sitting at the other end of this table. And this is in a manufacturing facility that had to have been built in the 50s. It had, brown walnut paneling. I love these places because they don't waste any money on the accoutrements. They spend their money on machinery and staff. So, we got past the pleasantries, and I said, do you mind if I ask you a couple of quick questions? And he said, and I quote, and it's in the book, no, you work for me now, boy. I'll be asking you the questions. And I'm Canadian, so I got to be polite, right? part of the chairman. I said, really? And I opened on my jack pocket and then I pulled out this envelope and I pulled out his check. I said, do you recognize this? He said, yeah, it's my check. I said, you'll notice I didn't cash it. So I'm going to ask you 3 questions. You get the 3 questions right, we take the assignment, we do the project. You get any of the questions wrong, I tear through the signature block, hand you back the check, you take me and Steve out for lunch, and we're good. We'll fly back. And before we got a chance to say yes or no, because there's 2 people, his chairman and the other guy were just dumbfounded, I started asking the questions, and the 3 questions are in the book. And at the end of this thing, the reason I wrote the book was what most clients don't realize is that retain and contingency companies have hands-off lists. And this guy had hired the 2 largest search firms in the world, who collectively had about 36,000 companies that they could not recruit from legitimately without getting in trouble. So all this guy saw was a bunch of unemployed consultants that kind of knew his space. And I didn't even get to the 3rd question. I said, we're going to do the deal. I said, so I'll cash a check. Now, do you guys want to go talk about this over lunch? Because now it's like 11:30. You want to go have lunch? Come back and we'll write this up because I need a lot more details, or we can stay over. I don't care, but and the rest is history. We were in and out in 6 weeks. But realizing that most clients don't know what they don't know, I wrote that book for that reason. And it sold well in the States, but more to the point, it's in Chinese, and it sold 1 million copies in modified Chinese in the first 6 months it was out. So, I poke fun every now and then, but we all know the Chinese only steal the best. So my point being, if the Chinese are stealing this book, maybe everybody else should read it too.
That's hiring greatness.
Hiring greatness, how to recruit your dream team and crush the competition. And it really gives you the attitude that you have to walk into as the consultant who knows what they're doing and how you bring that across in your meeting. And it's not being an arrogant snot. Maybe I was that day. I don't think so because I'm Canadian, right? We're really polite. But most of our business comes from the types of questions that I ask clients that most recruiters don't ask clients. Ask 2 or 3 of these questions and have the CEO or the VP HR or the VP of sales sort of look at you like a deer in the headlights. And that's when you go, okay, you're not ready for this meeting. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to send you this Word document. It's got 20 questions in it. You sit down, answer the Word document. You send me that back. And then we jump on a Zoom call or I come and meet you face to face. And then we're going to do a detailed SWOT analysis on what this role needs and why, and where the business is and why, and who the competitors are, primary, secondary, and why, and how you're competing against them. And people will go, well, why do you need to know all that information? I said, I need to know it because anybody who's any good, who I recruit, who's going to be looking at your company, if they're not asking me those questions, and they will, because they'll ask me those questions before they ever get to you, are going to ask you. So we need to know the answers. Otherwise, we will not keep their attention. So if you get that and you understand that intuitively, then, we're probably going to have a great search and we're going to do business for a long time. And if you don't, then I can't help you. And sorry.
I've got a question for you. It's come from the audience, come from Taisha over in California. So she's up early to come and watch this. And she sort of wants to take you back to, the days when you had no social proof of how good you were. How did you overcome that particular challenge? And before think about that, you said there were 2 books. Do you mean Executive Recruiting for Dummies as well as Hiring for Greatness, or have you got another one you want to flash above the screen?
No, I got 7 books. Those are the only ones that are really of interest. Taisha, the easiest way to do that, I hope I got your name right. The easiest way to do that is what I did. Back in 1988, when I went under my own, I bought a book called Guerrilla Marketing. I actually wrote a series of books called Guerrilla Marketing, but I bought a book called Guerrilla Marketing, and it taught me 100 ways, still on the market, 100 ways to get free PR. So my social proof came from writing a press release, which got picked up by the local paper. And I've done that strategy from the beginning. I wrote a piece that got picked up by Daily Commercial News, which is the Bible for the construction industry in Canada. And I went from daily commercial news to the one for the real estate industry. And then I went to the local business press here in Ottawa. Then I went to the local real newspaper here in Ottawa. I can't say that, they won't see this. And then I went to the Wall Street. Then I went to the Globe and Mail, which is the National Post. So I have built my reputation before social media came along through PR and marketing. You know, I became that guy, right? And I became that guy because the press said I was that guy. So, you know, I've been on, I don't know, been in a couple of hundred newspapers and magazines globally. I've been on, you know, and it's not bragging if it's true, I've been on every single television station, not station, but network in the States. I've been on CBS, NBC, ABC, NPR, and it's just PR and marketing, plain old press releases that get sent out. And every time I'm in the press, if I'm in the press, the radio people will call. If I'm on the radio, the press and the television people will call. I said Wall Street Journal, New York Times, you know, London Times. That's how I ended up doing. I'm sure both of you are familiar with Canary Wharf.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we hired the guys that built the retail component of Canary Wharf while I was sitting here in Ottawa. And that allowed me to recruit the guy out of Bovis. Remember Bovis? The construction.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I took the director of PR and marketing out of Bovis after I'm doing this work for O&Y, building up Canary Wharf, and I brought him to Canada and put him in a tiny little company called Ellis Dawn Construction Company. There were 307 million. I put them in as the director of PR. They'd never spent so much money in their entire life. The CEO yelled at me when he found out how much money he's going to pay for this guy. He retired 3 years ago. I know this because I put Stephen Gash in 2 weeks before my son was born. My son is 28. And Stephen stayed 25 years. And by the time he left, he was a divisional president. And the business has grown to 3.4 billion. And he was the critical hire. So how do I get those pieces? By doing PR and telling these stories. And, you know, now that we have the net, you know, I write case study after case study after case study. You know, I wrote guerrilla marketing for job hunters because I wanted to be the good guy in the industry as a recruiter. Yeah. And that's what that book allowed me to do. It allowed me to appear to be the good guy. So I'll be quiet now because I'm watching it.
Well, David, it's not about being quiet. I think you know, we're sitting here listening rapt really in terms of to your stories, but they're not stories. They're real life case studies in their own way. We've run through the half an hour, and I'm just conscious that, you know, people come and go and listen for that time. So it's been fascinating listening to you. I do hope people do look you up on the web. Perry Martel in Ottawa is obviously your firm. You've obviously done an awful lot of searches. You've written some great books. You're very entertaining, so we really do appreciate you here today. And obviously, all the advice that David's given is actually information we've shared the information with David before, and you know, we sort of adopt some of his practices because we think they're really good. And if you do want to any you know, conversation pieces here, please do feel free to get in touch with us, and we'll help share your thoughts with you. But also, we really do sincerely hope that you actually picked up some great snippets. I've just picked up some great snippets. I know Joe. Hopefully, I'm sure your brain was worrying. I think I'm going to drop that to our next training course. That's going to be a good one to put in there.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate your time today. So, anything else you want to add, David, before we cut you off?
Me?
Yeah. Anything else you want to say as a fan of our? Give
I think that I think that this is the best time. I've been in this business for 35 years. This is the best time to be in this industry. Especially if you're more than a resume peddler, if you want to actually be a consultant, if you want to actually hire yourself on with companies and be a strategic advisor. I mean, we had a client 2 years ago, new client, and we're talking price, and we're talking with the CEO and the general manager, construction, and we told him it was 33%, and he goes, "Oh my God, that's expensive." And the CEO, literally, we're sitting in the boardroom, smacks him in the side of the arm, and he says, "What are you talking about? We hired 4 superintendents last year. We paid 20%. None of them lasted more than 3 months. This guy's going to charge us 33%, and he guarantees them for a year. He says, I'm saving money already." Mm-hmm. There's still
it's so true, David. I mean, that methodology that we talk about there, that's a principle. You know, I say you and I, as or us, I mean, all of them, we sort of share those principles of doing the job correctly. And I know from your deep search processes that you've got, those are things that we here at iIntro, we actually sort of believe in those as well. And that's a bit, one of the reasons why I think you've joined us on this call, and we appreciate, is because you are a giver. Yeah, in terms of you sharing information, and that's what we are. So we like to sort of share information. So this show today it's educational as well as entertainment in some respects. I hope it's a bit of entertainment as well. It's educational to give people that extra information, and that's sort of what we do. So we really do hope people get in touch. We hope they buy your books, David, not because you need the royalties from those, just because
I make 25 cents every time.
Well, some of the links to the books are in the comments, but of course, I'm sure people can follow you. We can link in with you on LinkedIn as well.
The interesting.
We'll get you back again, David. We'll get you back again.
Definitely.
For
about 5 hours next time. A good 5 hours, I reckon.
Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day.
Yeah, listen, thanks for joining us today, David. So from everybody, listen, next week, it's going to be Joe talking with the marketing director of iIntro, Finn Patrick. So that's going to be a really interesting show on marketing. So please do look out for information on that show. Joe will be sharing with you. I'm actually taking a week off, so I won't be joining you, but I will be listening in, probably on replay, if I'm really honest. But I'll be listening in, so we'll wish you well. So thanks very much for joining us. So it's goodbye from me.
It's goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from David. David, always
Cheerio.
A pleasure.
Cheerio.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Well, I don't think they need me anymore. No, probably not.